Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us on this Thursday. I know it's normally not the day that we'll do these kinds of classes, but we had to switch it up with 4th of July being on Tuesday. So thank you for joining us. My name is Zach Wilson, and I'm one of the IRA specialists here at Quest Trust Company. So before we get started, got to give you the disclaimer. Everything that you're about to see here is for your educational purposes only. It's important to understand the role that Quest will play when it comes to your retirement investments. We're really here to offer as much education and as many resources as we can to both our clients and investors, as well as facilitate most of the transactions that you would request within your account. But with that being said, Quest does not offer any sort of tax, legal, or investment advice, nor do we endorse any specific investment. So for those of you who don't know us, we are Quest Trust Company. We are the largest self-directed IRA custodian in the state of Texas. We have roughly 20,000 active investor clients all across the country. We have just over 2.8 billion in assets under administration. We're hoping that number keeps on going up. We have over 100 employees, 34 of which are certified IRA service professionals. What does that mean? That means that no matter when you give us a call, you're going to have someone who's going to answer the phone with you and answer the phone and be able to answer most questions that you have and talk with you about some of your problems and solutions that you could be facing. Also, if you want to take a deep dive into the nitty gritty, we have 34 certified IRA service professionals there to take that dive with you. And as it stands right now, we have just over $400 million in cash and sitting in undirected cash sitting in our clients' accounts. That represents opportunity, right? Whether you're a current part of that Quest pool or you're someone who needs capital to make your deals happen, that's where your opportunity is going to lie. Now, before you make any investment at all, what's always the first step is to educate yourself. Right? Utilize us as a resource for your education. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out our education center on our website. We have hundreds of completely free videos going over every aspect of investing, all the way from introducing you to what self-direction is and kind of the 101 basics, all the way to the ins and outs of like things like syndication investments, right? And what implications that can have for your account. All right. Now, once you're comfortable and you found what type of investment you want to pursue, well, the deal's not just going to make itself happen, right? So utilize us again as a networking resource, right? Build that network. Come join our in-person socials on the first, second, and third Tuesday of every month in Houston, Austin, and Dallas, respectively. All right, how it starts? It'll start at 6:30 every single week. From there, we're going to allow about 30 minutes of networking, after which we're going to have a speaker come out. It's going to be a different topic every time. And they're going to talk for about 45 minutes to an hour, after which we allow for more networking and deal pitching. So if you have a deal that you're looking to raise capital for, or like I said, you just have funds you're simply looking to deploy and you want people to know that that's available, come check us out. Come check out one of these socials that we have. I promise you won't regret it. Now, for this next social, for the social for July, we are switching things up a bit. So the first Tuesday, like I said, it fell on 4th of July. We didn't want to force people to have to choose between attending our class or going and celebrating 4th of July. So we went ahead and bumped it back 1 week. It's going to be our luau link up. This is going to be strictly networking. And you see there's a QR code right there. You can scan that to register or just go on our website and under our events tab. And so instead of there being a speaker coming out, what it's going to do is we are going to allow for just strictly networking. Right. Yes, we'll have our vendors come out and speak, just so they can introduce themselves to our clients. But that's going to get a chance for all of our clients to really meet face to face so that they can build that network that we're always talking about. Also, come check out our Elite Multifamily Summit. It's going to be in Irving, Texas on August 12th, 2023. All right. It's going to be the Omni Las Colinas Hotel. And we're going to go over every aspect of multifamily investing, right? There's been a lot of changes recently in the multifamily space. It's important to keep up with the trends. It's important to keep up with how due diligence changes from year to year on these types of investments. And so we're going to take a look at that, right? We're going to take a look backwards to see the lessons learned. We're going to take a look forward to see where we think that sector is going. Now, while you're really here, is so that we can talk about how you can utilize your small dollar accounts, right? Those 10K or less accounts in order to grow them and build the wealth that you see. Now, a lot of people think that, well, really, once they've got a small account, you can't really participate in alternative assets because there's simply, you can't afford to get into there, right? Because there's usually either investment limits or the asset itself is expensive enough to where you're not going to be able to purchase it outright. But I promise you there are solutions. We're going to take a look at what that really means. So how do you turn a small account into a big account? It's going to be leveraging, right? Now, most people, what I think when they think of leveraging, I know they're only thinking about a loan, right? I'm going to leverage some funds. I'm going to leverage my property, right, in order to get cash out. That's one type of leveraging, but it's not the only type. So, really, let's take a look at what leveraging is as a whole. Leveraging is just the use of small initial investment in order to gain a higher return in relation to the initial investment or to control a larger investment. All right, now, like I said, whenever we're talking about leveraging, most people think of money, right? Either you have the money already, and so you can leverage that to purchase assets, to enter into investments, or you qualify for debt. So you can take a loan out, and now you're leveraging debt in order to get into those investments. But there are different types. So, like I said, the first one's money. We've already discussed that. But the next one is going to be time. You can leverage your time in really two different types of ways. One, long term, right? For example, I purchased a piece of property and I'm going to hold on to this. I plan on holding on to this for 10, 15, 20 years, knowing that simply the market is going to cause it to appreciate. And now I'm utilizing the time that I have in order to help that investment grow. Now, if you are already retirement age, maybe that's not the strategy you're looking to go to, right? Maybe you don't have the long-term time, but when you're retired, you probably have the short-term time, right? Since you're not working, you've got more time in your day to get to dedicate to these investment strategies. So now you utilize the time day by day that you have in order to get these investments, get into these investments and help that account grow faster. The next one is going to be talent, right? For myself, I consider myself a fairly good public speaker, and I would think that that's a talent of mine. If I needed to present even a nuanced topic to someone, I feel like I could break it down pretty easily into a palatable form so that you can understand it. Right now, the networking, right, walking into a room filled with people who are all talking and just being able to enter into a conversation, that's not a talent of mine, right? However, my girlfriend, she's amazing at doing it. She can walk into a room. She can start a conversation with a brick wall, and that brick wall is going to give her their contact information. You know what I'm saying? She has that talent to be able to network like that. And so she can utilize that talent to build a network, to build relationships, to get into investments and partner with people. All right. And finally, like I said, that network is going to be a key factor when it comes to growing these small dollar accounts. Right, whether it's utilizing that network for someone who's acting as a mentor for you, that they can teach you tons of lessons and things that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of, and help you get ahead of the curve when it comes to these investments, or utilizing the network for someone who has capital, right? They have capital, so then they're willing to deploy it, and now you have that relationship with them that they're willing to lend you that money. Your network is going to be super key here. So throughout this presentation, we're going to take a look at what it looks like to utilize each one of these as a type of leverage. All right. And as we go through, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. At the end, we're going to address all the questions that people have, and then we'll knock them out there. So without further ado, let's take a look at case study number 1. All right. So case study number 1 has to deal with children who, if you didn't know, are expensive. All right. Obviously, this doesn't not just the supplies you need as a new parent when it comes to taking care of an infant, but even as they get older, whether it's school, clothing, right, extracurricular activities, it can be very expensive. So let's take a look at an example with our client of ours, Alan, and his son. So Alan was a real estate professional, right? For about 10 years, he had been doing wholesale deals. So he had time, right? He was an experienced real estate investor. He had time to build up that network and really be able to function in that space. So Alan's son goes to a private school, which can be expensive. And so after attending one of the Quest classes, Alan decided that he wanted to open up one of the ESAs, right? The Coverdell ESA, which is an account you can establish here that can be self-directed just like any one of the IRAs. But instead of being geared towards retirement, that account's geared to help you now when it comes for your child's educational expenses. Right. These are things like tuition, books, school supplies, uniforms, stuff like that. So Alan establishes that account and decides to contribute $1,000 to that account. Now, he could have done $2,000, but that's all he wanted to put in right there. So after that, Alan finds a deal. This person's a distressed seller. They inherited a property. They're not one that's been They're not really a real estate investor. They don't know what it really takes. They don't understand it, and they're not really willing to. They don't want to, or they just simply want to offload it. So he makes a quick offer, and he doesn't really know the title issues associated with it. So what he decides to do is he decides that he's going to negotiate a wholesale contract, closing in 60 days, using $100. Right. This gives him first right to buy the property for that 60-day span. Now he's using his son's ESA for this investment. Right. The ESA that only had $1,000 now just entered into a wholesale contract deal. So he submits the wholesale contract to his son's ESA as the buyer or the optionee, and he vests it in the name of the ESA. So Quest Trust Company, FBO, his son's name, ESA, the account number. And then from there, his offer is accepted, and he has the option to purchase the property in exchange for that $100 consideration. So let's take a look what that means. Long term, 2 months later, he's assigned the contract for $10,000 to an investor he met at a local networking event. That networking, right? It's never a bad idea to help build that network to go to these events. So from there, he immediately withdrew $5,000 from the account, completely tax and penalty free, to pay for his son's tuition, books, computer, and other education-related expenses. The Coverdell accounts can be used to pay for your children from kindergarten all the way through college, and he saved the rest in there for future years' educations and his son's college. All right. So in that deal, what was leveraged? First, his talent. He had the ability over his years of experience. He had harnessed that ability to be able to network with people, to tell them and introduce these ideas and be able to sell these investments in a way that made sense for the buyer, right? Because it has to make sense for them in order for the deal to be a actual, sellable deal. So he uses talent and then his network. Now, it's very important to understand that wholesaling, when people think of wholesaling, they see that, I put up $100, I got 10,000 back. Why would anyone choose to do anything else? This seems like the easiest way with the lowest barrier of entry. I promise you that's not the case. Right? Like I said, Alan has been an investor for 10 years. He has had his time to build his network. All right. So now he has a list of buyers that he can go to. Right. He also has the ability to contact those buyers and be able to sell them on these investments, right? And be able to make it make sense for them to want to purchase that property. So he used his talent, right? And he had utilized his time over the past 10 years and the network that he had built in order to get that property and that option contract sold for that $10,000 to get the return to his son's ESA. Now, let's look at case study 2. So this one, we're going to be looking at partnering accounts, right? This is something that we'll hear a lot whenever it comes to the investments and conversations that we as IRA specialists have with our clients. A lot of them, what they're wanting to do is they're looking to get into these deals, but they know, like especially for syndication investments, they know that they don't have enough to initially get into the deal. And so what will they do? They'll partner with someone else to make that minimum investment, right? So in this example, Derek and Brian found a cheap piece of land. Total price was for $9,500, and he planned to sit on it for several years and let it appreciate in value. Now, I know what you said, right? This is supposed to be a 10K or less class, right? Am I utilizing everything to go in here? No, they're partnering. Neither of them had enough to purchase it directly. So Derek and Brian decided to partner together for the purchase price. The vesting is going to be listed Quest Trust Company, FBO, Derek Long, IRA, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as to the undivided interest of 50%. It's going to show the same thing for Brian's IRA. And that undivided interest is extremely important because that's what's going to show us how much ownership they have over that property. Now at closing, $4,750 will come from Derek's and Brian's account to go towards the purchase. So something happened. After the property was held, sorry about that, everybody. So after the property was held for 45 days, they had it appraised and it was going for $15,500. So they sold it at the appraisal price. That $7,750 went back to each of the accounts completely tax-free. Keep in mind that these are tax-advantaged accounts. There was no debt leverage happening here. No personal property was owned. No business was being run. So no UBIT, UDFI. That means the entirety of that amount went back to the accounts. All right, and then from there, they build their wealth using unique ways. Now, what does that mean? Notice how two people partnered in order to purchase this asset. That means I didn't have to rely on my pool of funds solely to purchase the assets, right? I was able to contact someone I knew. They also didn't have that much. They were in the same boat as me. They didn't think, or that Brian was the same boat as Derek. He didn't think that he could purchase anything with that amount, but together they were able to get this deal under contract. And from there, percentage return was a 58% return for over 45 days. Not bad. Not bad at all. All right, especially when compared to things like your CDs and your mutual funds. This can also be done with your children. So let's say you set up a Roth account for them and you made just their annual contribution 1 year and that's all they had in there, or they have that ESA that's sitting in a really low dollar amount. Well, you can utilize those accounts and partner them on the purchase of this property. And all of the profits go back to all of the accounts involved, completely tax free. And keep in mind that Derek and Brian were in control the entire time. At any point, they could have decided that they wanted to sell it for more, or they maybe wanted to undercut some of the other pieces of land and just get it off their hands quickly. Regardless, that was their decision, and they maintained control of it from the very beginning all the way through the very end when they got their return. So what was leveraged in this example? Network. This is going to be the most important, and it's going to be a theme throughout all of these. Really, you'll see is that network. All right, Derek knew Brian. He had built that relationship with him. He knew that Brian had a smaller dollar account and that really didn't think he could get involved. When Derek saw this opportunity, he contacted Brian, reached out to him, let him know, like, hey, do you want to split this investment with me? That way we can both take a return into our account. And Brian said yes. Also, utilize his time. Right, this is where a time where Derek had some time to really focus on his real estate investments. Right, he had the time to dedicate, and so did Brian. Right, Brian had just gotten out of the military, so he had the time to dedicate to actually do the due diligence on the property, to make the calls to the people he needed to see what permits were on there, to see the zoning. Right, to take a look at all of that, get everything surveyed, and he utilized his time because he had his time more than he had capital. And finally, other people's money. Right? Derek didn't have enough, so he utilized Brian's money. Brian the same way. Brian didn't have enough, he utilized Derek's. OPM. All right. It's a beautiful thing about investing into alternative assets. Now, let's take a look at case study number 3. So this one, it's going to be a little bit more complex, but I think it highlights some important factors and some important opportunities. But before we dive in, let's want to take a look and see if we had any questions in the chat. So no questions so far. With that, let's get into case study number 3. So case study number 3 focuses on lending and borrowing. So let's take a look first at the scope of the work. So the purchase price for a piece of property, right, was $120,000, and the rehab cost was going to be $60,000 to $70,000. So leaving it with an ARV after repairs, that's the after repair value of $275,000. Now, what was the borrower's request? Right, the borrower, keep in mind, in this case, you're the lender, right? The borrower was asking for $30,000. They were going to provide first lien position, offered a 9% interest, and 2 points on the back end. All right, but know what you're thinking. Oh, this is supposed to be a 10K or less class. All right, now we're talking about lending out $30,000. Well, that $30,000, like we saw in the past example, doesn't have to come from a single account. And that's sure enough what they did here. This is actually another example of Derek and Brian, right? Except this case involves some other people. So what they did, they utilized Derek's IRAs, his wife's IRAs, his wife's father's IRA, as well as Brian's IRA, all of which were lower dollar accounts. But when this investment opportunity presented itself, they didn't want to pass up on the opportunity. So Derek reached out to everyone, let them know what the parameters of the promissory note were. Everyone said it was good to go. They did their due diligence and they decided to move forward with it. And just to take a closer look at what it looks like as the lender, right? You see here, it's showing each one of their IRAs as an individual lender to a specific percentage of the overall note, right? Totaling 100% and dollar amount totaling $30,000. So in this case, the borrower, right? The borrower was able to profit now by leveraging someone else's retirement accounts. They were able to get that deal done because someone had retirement funds saved up, not in all one account, but collectively they had enough saved up. The funds were gathered from family, right? If you know someone in your family that's looking to get on this investment, but they don't have enough to get in, you don't have enough to get in, maybe you have some friends that don't have enough to get in either. You guys can pool your funds together, right? That is the strength of numbers. You guys can actually pull your funds together to utilize and get into these investments you otherwise wouldn't have access to. On top of that, you're profiting both today and in the future, right? Your IRAs are growing right now, and then down the line, you're going to be able to take those funds out for your retirement purposes. And in the cases like a Roth IRA, those funds are coming out tax and penalty free once you reach retirement age. They also had security for the investment. Right. Yes, it was a small dollar amount, so it's easy to rationalize like, oh, well, maybe they're okay with, with maybe losing out on the deal. No, that's not the case here. These are the only cash that these people had available in their retirement accounts, right? Losing this, even though it's not the flashiest amount, losing this would have been a major hit, not only financially, but personally, right? For their morale. You would be dissuaded if something went wrong, you lost everything, and then that was it. You had to start from scratch, right? Also, you're going to be more hesitant to get on these deals for good reason. So because of that, they had security on the investment. All right, that $30,000 was secured by a property that had an ARV of 275. Worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario, things go wrong. The borrower defaults. Now you've got a property for pennies on the dollar. Right? The downside is being really outweighed by the upside. And then, like I said, because they're utilizing retirement accounts and tax exempt entities, they're being able to take all this profit back completely tax free, right? To help it grow tax deferred in the account, or like the Roth IRA or the ESA, completely tax free even on the growth. So in this example, what was leveraged for this deal? First, the talent. Right, being able to go to these people, being able to present this idea, because there's a lot of moving parts in this, right? And it doesn't really make sense, right? If you're not conveying this message properly and able to really illustrate the opportunity that's sitting in front of you, which is a talent, then that deal wouldn't have happened. They would have lost out. And again, like I said before, his network, he utilized, in this case, his family and an old military friend of his to help gather the pool of funds. Your network is stronger than you think it is. I promise you that. You have more value available to you than you think you do. It's just a matter of finding it. It's just a matter of talking to the people, bringing it up. I know it can be a little awkward, right? It can be a little awkward, but bring it up. You never know who's also looking to get on an investment, but is just simply dissuaded from the amount of money that they have. You guys are stronger together. And yet again, OPM, right? Other people's money. Utilizing other people's money in order to get in on an investment you would otherwise not have access to. Let's look at the next one, case study number 4. So again, we're going to get a little bit more complex every single time. So this one, we're going to talk about a second lien position. Second lien position. I know most people, there's a stigma around second lien positions that you should avoid them at all costs. You shouldn't do it. Let's pump the brakes. Let's slow down. Let's take a look at this deal and see if it doesn't pique your interest, right? So in this case, the original borrower, they used $150,000 from Jet Lending. Purchase price was for $120,000, roughly $50,000 in repairs, and then the ARV was over $300,000. So Jet Lending was willing to lend to them. But they encountered a problem. When they were going through the home, they actually found mold upon the inspection and needed an additional $10,000 to help get rid of that and fix that problem, get that knocked out. And so they needed smaller investors to step in and help. So like I said, I know everyone has a stigma around second lien positions. There really is. And look, for good reason. There are risks associated. But I promise you, there is something to be noticed and something to learn whenever you're looking at a proper second lien. Right? So what does a proper second lien look like? Well, first, I'm going to contact the first lien holder, right? If I'm going on second lien, right, I'm going to contact that first lien holder, let them know, like, hey, did you know the borrower is looking for additional funds, right? I'm not doing this because I'm trying to talk behind the borrower's back and like report them. No, if the first lien holder knows that, they might just increase the loan amount, right? Do a little modification on the note, additional to raise that principal up 10,000, or maybe another loan, right? They could potentially want to just step in, and the need for a second lien is gone at that point. So you want to be sure that the first lien holder knows that the borrower is looking for a second lien. Now, you want to explain the situation to them. I'm going to be sure I have a conversation with both the borrower and the first lien holder to exactly what is going on. All right. One, to be sure I know exactly what's going on. I can illustrate that to them. And two, to be sure all three of us are on the same page. Now, this doesn't have to be a conversation that's a bad one, right? In this case, it wasn't a mismanagement of funds, right? It wasn't that someone didn't do their job and now more cash was needed. It was actually quite the opposite. Because they did their due diligence, they got a proper inspection done. They found the mold that someone had missed beforehand, and they needed the additional cash to help fix that. So you want to be sure everyone's on the same page as exactly what's happening. And you also want to be sure that they make sure they know they need more funds. Like I said, the first lien holder might be able to want to step in and just do it to kind of circumvent having a second lien at all. And this does not mean that the deal is bad. Like I said, this conversation doesn't have to be a bad one. This can be a good conversation just to be sure everyone's on the same page. And when you have that type of clarity, that type of transparency, it makes everyone more comfortable on the deal. All right. Still, with all that being said, your due diligence is key. Right. Know how much is owed on the property. Know what the ARV is looking at. Know what the rehab costs, what the timeline looks like. What's the likelihood that they're going to sell? And if they don't, if it goes into default, what's the likelihood that the cost of that property, right, the value of that property will be able to cover both the first lien and your second lien position, right? How safe are you? What's your risk on this? All this is part of the due diligence that goes into these second lien positions. And you want to know the borrower. If you're going in a second lien position, you want to be sure you know exactly who it is that is borrowing those funds. One, to be sure they have that reputation, right? Be sure that they know what they're doing. They've done these investments before. This is someone's first investment, and it's really kind of been shaky up until this point, and now they're wanting more capital in a second lien position. I might be a little hesitant, right? Now, same situation, right? Well, I guess say same situation, same property, right? Except it's someone, in this case, experienced investor. They know what they're doing. It was actually the inspection that they had that showed that there was some more damage in the case of mold in this example. All right. Well, I'm a little bit more comfortable with that person. They're an experienced investor. They just need more capital than when originally, because they found some more problems. They did their proper due diligence. Now I'm more comfortable with lending. Also, know the first lien holder. Who are you dealing with on that end? All right. In this case, we're dealing with Jet Lending, with someone that we know Quest has a good relationship with. We know Jet. We know their vetting process. So in this case, it made sense, right? You want to know that first lien holder. Also, don't over leverage. Do not over leverage yourself on a second lien position. All right. The reason people have this stigma is because it is riskier than a first lien position, right? Just by definition, it is. You are second in the pecking order when it comes to recouping your funds in the case of default. So don't over leverage yourself. Don't use everything you have, right? You want to be sure you're partnering together, you're getting funds together, and you don't want to be sure you're using your entire pool of funds. If in the case, let's say you've got your main IRA that has the bulk of your funds, but then you've got your child's IRA, right? That is a very small amount. And it's okay if something were to happen there, maybe utilize that small IRA. In this case, like I said, less than 10K. All right. And finally, use a good attorney. All right. It's just like going, for a surgery, right? If I'm going to buy entertainment things, right, I can cut costs, right? I can buy a little bit cheaper things as long as it looks good. That's fine. With things like lawyers, doctors, that's not the place to cut costs. Use a good attorney. Use a good attorney to be sure everything is drafted up properly and you're protected, or as protected as you can be. All right. So what does the loan process look like? So they were lending out $10,000. And to be sure, knowing that this was going to be a pretty short-term note, all right, you wanted to be sure you still make a good profit, right? Because you're there. It's fine. You're there to protect yourself. You're there to be sure that this is actually worth the money that you're putting up. So in this case, they charged 5 points on the back end and had a monthly payment of 1%. So essentially it was 12% interest. All right. And they passed the attorney fees and the Quest fees associated with the custodian, whether it's Quest or anyone else, off onto the borrower. right? Cutting the cost of this overall deal, helping it make sense. So now that the deal went through, let's take a look at it. So this is going to be the profits made in 2 months' time. You had $500 from the points, $200 in interest payments because it was 2 months. You received your $10,000 back, meaning you're looking at $10,700 total return on the investment. All right, that's 7% return on 2 months of investment. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. And now you're known as someone who can do these small second lien positions, right? This is something that you'd be surprised how often is needed, right? Just for something small, we just need to knock it out real quick. In this case, like you said, 2 months, get it turned around and get it back to you. We just need someone to cover that for the time being. And now you are someone that they can go to, right? Obviously, this still means you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to do everything you normally would. It's just helping build that network. So speaking of network, what was leveraged? All right, when we look at these accounts, what exactly was leveraged? First, talent. All right, your ability to go out and make these deals make sense. I keep saying it, but I promise you, it just needs to stick, right? You have the talent to do this, right? Whether it's making the deals make sense or building a team, building people, you're grabbing people in, getting them to be involved in this investment. You have a talent that you can utilize for investments like this. So make sure you're utilizing it. Secondly, the common thread through everything is the networking, right? The network was able to be used, right? Whether it's knowing someone who's doing these fix and flips and needs the money, right? Or it's someone who can get you connected with those types of people, right? Building your network is never a bad thing. It is always something that in the end can help you out. So finally, let's take a look at the last example, and that's going to be case study number 5. So case study number 5 has a couple of steps, and we'll look through each one of these individually. So first is going to be the rental. All right. So in this case, a friend had a property, right? This is one of our clients. A friend had a property, and the tenants had just left, and they left it a mess. It was horrible. The house was in terrible condition, and this was owned by an older gentleman. All right. The older gentleman really just did not want to deal with it. And what he was willing to do is say, okay, here are the keys. Let me know what she would do, right? And maybe do the repairs first before we sell it so we can sell it at a higher value. So client said, perfect. And when they took a look, they looked at the rehab. So the rehab was a total of $28,000, right? These were going to be for repairs to the exterior home. What you're looking at is the actual breakdown of costs right there. So it's going to be repairs to the home, fresh exterior paint, repairs to the fences on the property, and some of the electrical repairs were needed. All right. So they determined this was needed going to be for the rehab. And so what they did was they put an offer in. Right. The purchase price was going to be $130,000 because they knew each other. Right. No realtor was needed. I would not recommend that. Right. Always use a realtor. Right. Always use a realtor unless you really personally know the person. Obviously, I can't tell you what you should and shouldn't do. It matters from case to case, but it always makes sense usually to use a realtor. Something just to keep in mind. Right. It's not always the savings on it are not always worth the trouble that it comes with it. All right. Next, they decided that they were going to be paying the property taxes. The purchaser was going to pay the property taxes for the year. So if you notice, this is the actual contract right here. It was made in July, right? And so the original owner, the seller, they still owed 6 months of property taxes. They said, the buyer would say, no, don't worry about that. I'm going to take that off your hands because I want to close on this quickly. I want to make it make sense for you. And they also offered to covering the closing costs associated with this investment. All right, but they needed a loan. They needed a loan for the property. And so what does that loan look like? So the ARV in the areas was around 190 to 195. All right, mind you, go back. I'm sorry, 1 second. Let's go back. Buying price was 130. ARV was going to be 190, 195. So this was in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So as the market really started to take off, the lender was willing to give an 85% LTV of the after repair value of the property. So at $195,000, 85,000 or 85% of that was going to be $161,500 minus the 30 for repairs. So because they had so much equity in the home, they decided that all they was going to need for closing was going to be $7,600. Right? They're going to be able to purchase a property for $7,600. But that didn't come without any strings attached. So what did the lender need? Well, the lender wanted a good contractor with a proven track record. So they wanted, in this case, they got a certified contractor to come out and take a look at what the repairs were going to be, right, and how much it was going to cost. On top of that, they needed the borrower, a good borrower with a reputation. They wanted to be sure they knew this was going to be an investment property. They wanted to know that the person they were lending to wasn't somebody who was doing this for the very first time. They wanted a proven track record on that borrower. Also, in this case, they wanted good credit. So this is happening outside of an IRA. Your IRA can still borrow funds, right? It can still borrow funds and do this exact deal. The only difference is that it's going to be in the form of what's called a non-recourse note, right? It's going to function the exact same as a traditional note would, right? The only difference is that it contains non-recourse language that states, in the case of default, the lender cannot go after any other assets either held in the IRA or held by that person individually. They can only go after that one property tied to it. So what does this mean? Is there would have been probably a little bit higher closing costs. I'm sorry, not closing costs, a higher down payment, right? And you might have needed to utilize someone else and bring them in and utilize that partnering. But in this example, it's an individual, so he was able to utilize his credit, all right? And also they wanted to know the full scope of the project. What does that mean though? Really the full scope of the project. Well, they wanted to know, one, what is being used, right? Is this going to be a fix and flip? And so you're really going to pay the principal back with the sale of the property after? Or is this going to be a buy and hold for a rental property? In which case, monthly payments are going to be covered by the tenant's rental payments that are going to be coming in. Also, they're going to take a look at those repairs, right? That's why they want that certified contractor to come in and provide that invoice. The lender wanted to see that, wanted to see a breakdown of exactly what the repairs were needed, the total cost that was going to be going in for those repairs. And finally, they wanted proof of other projects. This kind of ties back to having a good borrower with a reputation, right? They wanted to know that the person that they were lending to, that this wasn't their first rodeo, right? That they were experienced in this and that things would run relatively smoothly. Any problems that were encountered could be solved by this person who had done other projects in the past. So what does it look like now? Currently, that property is rented for $1,800 a month. The monthly mortgage was $685 and plus taxes and insurance on top of that. So they refinanced it. It got appraised for $210,000. All right, that's $20,000 over what they thought it would be. All right, so a beautiful plus. Now, they were given the opportunity when they refinanced. Were they going to do a cash out refi? If they did, based off of the new ARV or that appraised value, they were going to be able to pocket roughly, $17,000, $18,000 into their pocket. But what did that mean? That means that now the monthly payments and the interest payments are going to be a little bit higher month to month, right? And so in this case, they actually left the equity in the property itself. And you're thinking, why? Why not? If you have the opportunity to take $17,000, $18,000, put it into your pocket, or even let's say $20,000. Let's say $20,000, put that into your pocket. Why wouldn't you? Right? Yeah, it's a little bit of a higher monthly payment, but why not take that? Well, let's really think about it. So $685 plus taxes and insurance right now. If they went with the cash out refi, right, that probably would have bumped up to somewhere to $800 to $900. So let's say it goes to $900, right? So in that example, $685 to $900, you're looking at an additional 100, or what is that? Additional 220, right? 215,000. Well, that's $215 a month. All right. So let's say 200 just for ease of numbers. Well, now after 10 months, you got 2,000, right? After 2 years, it starts to add up that the cost associated are going to eventually outweigh that 17,000 you've put in your pocket. Right? So the long-term play for them was to keep the monthly cost down. Right? Keep that monthly cost down. And now instead of taking the 18,000 as a lump sum putting into their pocket, think about it, they're now just taking $200. They're taking $200 every month and putting that into their pocket. And eventually that's going to make sense because they're going to hold on to this property for a long time as a rental property. And keep in mind, you're also going to have months that there's no tenants, right? In between tenants, there's going to be usually that 1 month of vacancy. And then the second month, give or take, if you're not able to put someone in. So let's just say 2 months, right? In this case, they thought about that and it made sense for them. Right? I'd rather take those 2 months with a lower value over pocketing the $17,000 in my pocket now. So what was leveraged in this deal? Talent. The ability to recognize the opportunity that sat in front of them, right? They saw the deal, they ran the numbers, and they realized, man, I could get into this deal. I can get into this property as a rental property, right? And only have to put down $7,600. That's not something you come across every day. That's something that you need to actually recognize and be able to sit down, run the numbers, and make sure that that makes sense for you. And that wasn't been possible without utilizing their network, right? They knew that person. They knew this person who had this rental property. They knew the situation that they were in, right? Because of the network and the relationship that they had built with him, they were able to step in and help this person out. And finally, for them personally, they were able to utilize their own credit, right? That credit, think of it, they were able to utilize debt, right? They were able to qualify for a loan and utilize that debt to help this deal move forward. So, like I said, guys, you notice the common theme here is network. That is your key. That is your key to getting in on these investments, right? Let's say you're an absolute newbie. You don't know anything about real estate investing. Well, you build that network. Once you build that network, you're going to be able to find someone who can act as a mentor for you, or you're going to be able to find people who can point you in the direction of where they learned their lessons, right? Where they went to, right? The classes they saw, the groups that they joined, right? The events that they attended that helped them build their foundation, right? From there, now you're starting to build that education, right? Now that you're building that education, it's hard to navigate alone in this space, even when you have the money and the knowledge to do it. Utilize your network now for partnering, right? Utilize your network now for deal finding, right? The opportunities are out there, but you have to find them, and how you find them is utilizing the network that you're building. And so how do you build that network? First, never hurts to have some business cards, right? Go to any event, make sure you got some business cards on you, right? It's always a bad feeling whenever you have a good conversation with someone, you're wanting to connect with them, and now, well, neither of you have a business card, and you're having to write down their information, and you're hoping you don't forget it in the time that it takes, for you to leave that event and remember to contact them. Next one, don't be shy. Everyone has been in this space, right? Everyone has been in this situation where you're new to it. You don't want to walk in. I'm still bad with it. This is something I'm still learning. You don't want to walk into a room and start a conversation with someone. But if there's one thing that you'll find in the real estate space is that people are open. People are a lot more open than you think. Everyone's looking to learn something, right? And it feels good when you finally make that shift from being the person who's learning stuff to being the person who's teaching stuff, right? It feels good to help people. So when you're going to talk to someone, don't hesitate to start that conversation. Also, if you've got a deal, if you've got an opportunity, always have your elevator pitch ready. All right, if you don't know what elevator pitch is, the idea is that you step into an elevator with someone that you're looking either to get a deal with, or you're looking, for a promotion, and your boss just stepped into the elevator, right? Can you sell yourself? Can you sell yourself or that deal from the time it takes the elevator to go from the first floor to the third floor? Can you do it? Quick, concise, and to the point. Can you illustrate the opportunity that you have? If not, take some time to work on that elevator pitch. Fourth one is go to local RIAs. There are real estate groups in just about everywhere in the United States. So utilize those groups. Utilize your local RIAs, all right, to help build that foundation of knowledge. From there, it's going to expand because someone in that group has gone somewhere else and traveled to an event, all right, to an educational event, and now they can tell you about it. And now that network starts to grow faster and faster, all right? Also, travel to education events, all right? Like the socials that we host on the first, second, and third Tuesday of every month. All right, make sure that you're going to those. You're learning as much as you can, and you're taking the time to go and leave and educate yourself on those. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. My email and my number is right there. All right, you can reach me at zachary.wilson@questtrust.com. Any one of the IRA specialists will be able to help you out. If you give us a call, go to 855-FUN-IRAs and ask to speak to an IRA specialist just to see what your options are. And don't forget, we still have the rewards for deposit promo going on. We extended it for one more month, right? So I know it says after April 1st, this is going to go a little bit further now, and we're going towards through the end of July. So utilize these, right? If you're bringing over funds and you think you're going to hit one of those qualifying marks, reach out to us, and we'll make sure that promo gets applied to your account. So I'll leave this up, and without further ado, do we have any questions in the chat? Here we go. Let's take a look back. So let's see here. So when someone lends for a fix and flip to a house you flip in your small dollar IRA, can it be a non-recourse loan? Is there any way to control your IRA as a trustee, perhaps through an LLC? All right, so let's tackle this. So we already kind of addressed the first part, was that yes, if your IRA is borrowing funds, right, it can be, or are you looking to lend in this example? When someone lending for a fix and flip house, you flip. Yeah, so you're flipping. In this case, you're borrowing funds. It has to be in the form of a non-recourse note. Absolutely. Right. So yes, that's going to affect probably the interest and the amount that you're going to have to put down, but it's also going to protect not only the assets, the other assets in your IRA, it's going to help protect the assets that you have personally. All right. Is there a way to control your IRA as the trustee? So keep in mind, you have full control of the IRA. Now, when we're talking about you bringing in an LLC, there are definitely some reasons people will do it, right? One could be maybe that they have a pool of funds, people are together, and they want to get a loan, and the lender doesn't want multiple borrowers, and they only want one. So you come together, form an LLC, and the LLC is the borrower. Still has to be in the form of a non-recourse note. But that's one strategy. Secondly, is asset protection, right? If you're going, for example, like if you're going into an investment, which it's like a rental property, and because you know you're going to have that increased liability associated with having tenants involved, some people will go through an LLC to make sure that they could draft up the LLC with that added asset protection. Again, just to be sure you're protecting not only your IRA's assets, but your assets personally. All right. So let's look at the next question. So when talking with the first, are they going to be contacted by the original borrower? Are they going to be contacted by the original borrower? Maybe when you're talking to them, you're going to be very upfront about this, right? You're not going behind the borrower's back. You can tell the borrower when they first present the opportunity to you, asking for funds in a second lien position, you can just tell them right there, right? Be upfront with it. But yeah, I'm going to do my own due diligence. Part of that is I'm going to contact the first lender, right? It makes sense. That's something, if they're not willing to let you do that, or if they take offense to that in some way, shape, or form, then that might not be a deal you want to get involved with. So let's see here. So is the interest rate typically higher in a second lien position? Yes. Yeah, typically so. The reason is because it's normally a lower dollar amount, right? And it won't really make sense if you're doing that low dollar amount with the lower interest rate, right? Because now the profits really aren't really worth the time, right? Your opportunity costs are going to start to outweigh what your return is on this investment, right? So usually it's going to be a little bit higher. You can make that up by, doing a little bit of a lower interest rate, but charging points up front or on the back. It's really up to you, but generally speaking, it will be a little bit higher. Oh, perfect. Then the second one right there. Let's see here. So this question, who are the non-recourse lenders you recommend? So as Quest, we can't recommend anybody. There are some large institutions that will do non-recourse notes. For example, Solera Bank, North American Savings Bank, Titan Bank will all do non-recourse notes. But look in your local area for hard money lenders. A lot of times hard money lenders, because they're dealing more direct with the borrower, right? The open line of communication that they have is a bit smoother, right? Because of that, they're usually more open to things like a non-recourse note versus a large institution, like you try to get a bank from just a large mortgage company. It's some faceless corporation. You're really just a number. They're going to punch your information in and it's going to tell them yes or no. They're not really going to hear out what your situation is. And so if that is the case, check out your local hard money lenders. They're usually more open to it. So it says, what happens to an IRA if you died? If if it goes to spouse or the child, and what are their tax implications. So if you were to pass your IRA, what happens next is going to depend on who it is that's inheriting it. All right. If it is your spouse, if your spouse as the primary beneficiary, they have the option to either take it as an inherited IRA or they could take it as their own. Right now, if they take it as their own, it'll be treated as if they were the original account holder, right? All the same rules are going to apply to them that applied to you before you had passed. Now, if they either they decide to take it as an inherited IRA or the children, right? Your children are your primary beneficiary and the account goes to them. Now it's under a 10-year rule, right? This is something that happened post Secure Act. Really, they're going to have, in most situations, right? Every situation is going to be a little bit different. In most situations, they're going to have 10 years to distribute the entirety of that account to themselves personally. Now, as far as what the tax implication is on that, it's really going to depend not only on the account type, right? Whether it's traditional or Roth, but also depend on your age, right? Were you before 59 and a half? Were you before your RMDs? Were you after your RMD age? All of that is going to factor in. If you do have questions or you're in a situation similar to that, right, where you've inherited an IRA, give us a call. We have an inherited department that can walk you through what all this looks like and kind of tell you your options moving forward. All right, and last question says, can you have both a self-directed IRA and a Roth IRA? So good question. And I think it's important to understand really, truly what a self-directed IRA is, right? That term self-directed, that's just a marketing term. That is just there to illustrate that you're the one in control of the investments. So there's no difference between a self-directed traditional or a self-directed Roth IRA here at Quest versus the traditional or the Roth IRA you would have at a large custodian like a Fidelity or a Vanguard. The only difference is the custodian themselves. They allow for investments into the public market. We allow for investments into privately held assets, specifically real estate style investments, what we specialize in. Right, so notice the accounts are identical, right? A traditional IRA is the same exact thing as a traditional IRA over there, and same with a Roth. So if you had Roth funds currently at your other custodian and you wanted to bring those over to get them self-directed here, just simply establish a Roth here at Quest, fill out a transfer form after we've got it established, and we'll actually initiate that transfer on your behalf. If you have more questions to that, you got my contact information right there. Feel free to reach out to me. All right, guys, I think that is the final question here. If you have any more questions, feel free to throw them in. I'm just looking through it right now. But if not, I want to let you guys go. Have a good rest of your day. Make sure you're coming to check out our Luau, the social, next week. Houston and Austin are on the same day, both on July 11th. Tuesday, obviously the Houston one's in the Houston classroom, Austin is in Austin classroom over there. And make sure, remember, that is just networking, right? So come with your business cards, come with that elevator pitch ready to go so that you can make your deal happen, or you can just let people know you've got capital and you're interested in getting involved. All right. Also, if you're thinking you're getting into the multifamily space or you're a seasoned investor in the multifamily space, but you're noticing the changes that are happening, check out that multifamily summit in Irving, Texas. Right, it's going to be very valuable for you. Like I said, we're going to take a look back at the lessons learned, right? What happened in the market so far and where we think that market is going, factoring in both the state of the economy as well as how the Fed is going to be treating interest rates. We know they had announced that they were going to have a pause, but they didn't say it's not permanent. They could hike it later. They keep flip-flopping back and forth whether we're going to get a soft landing or is the U.S. going to go into a recession. All kind of factors going in. We're going to really cover all of that in that elite multifamily summit. All right, guys. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. Give us a call. If I'm not available, any one of the IRA specialists will be able to help you out. They're all extremely knowledgeable. All right, we all will be able to help you out, and we're happy to take that deep dive of that conversation with you. But until then, you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye now.